Hello there, I'm Simon Rafe and welcome to Brown Bag Bible Study, the Bible study that you can do in your lunch break. Now this is an introduction to Scripture, which will give you some information that you might not have known, as well as encouraging you to read the Bible. Most importantly, it's presented in bite-sized pieces. These are perfect to fit in with our busy lifestyles today. Now, I'll be concentrating on a small part of Scripture every week, either one of the 73 books of the Bible or a group of related books, and I'll be bringing you interesting facts and information to help you understand it better. I'll also be including links to further reading, articles, books, and so forth, which will help you learn to love sacred Scripture even more. This week, the second book of Maccabees. Now, this book was probably written in Alexandria, probably in the 1st or 2nd century BC, and was most definitely written in Greek. The author claims he's producing a shortened version of a 5-volume work by Jason of Cyrene, although the original text has not been preserved. So, what's the book about? Well, if you've read the first 7 chapters of the first book of Maccabees, you know the story because it's the same one. It's just a retelling of the same historical period, but this is not primarily a pure history. It is written to edify and often seems more of a sermon than a book. Special emphasis is given to the divine protection the Jews enjoyed, and the book is very important because it shows a number of uniquely and prominently Catholic doctrines. It was perhaps this reason that Martin Luther, who disliked anything obviously and explicitly Catholic, particularly the physical, sacramental life of the church, hated this book so much. And yes, he did hate it. I'm not just saying that to make the man look bad. He does that himself when he says that he hated the book so much he wished it did not exist. Now, these uniquely Catholic doctrines are the ones we as Catholics should focus on, although the historical elements are helpful, and in some cases they expand and support the history in 1st Maccabees. It is the doctrinal teachings that we should really be looking at. Now, the passage which is most often quoted by Catholics is chapter 12, verse 38 to the end of the chapter. In here we see clear and explicit teaching concerning prayer for the dead, the idea of offering sacrifice for the dead, and in general, the doctrine of purgatory itself. The passage is so clear and so explicit, it is obvious the author wrote what he wrote just to make his doctrinal point, which is very useful to the Catholic apologist when you're defending the idea of purgatory from hostile Protestants. But this is not the only passage where an explicitly Catholic doctrine is found. In chapter 15, verses 11 to 16, a vision is recounted, a vision which clearly shows the intercession of the saints on behalf of the people of God. The prophet Jeremiah is explicitly said to pray for the people and the holy city of Jerusalem, which is the straight definition of intercessionary prayer. But perhaps the most famous passage is the 7th chapter, where the martyrdom of the 7 brothers is told. This passage is a sterling example of the bravery of martyrs in the face of death and destruction, and the church has recognized these Jewish martyrs as saints of the church, with many churches being dedicated to them. But in addition to that, this chapter contains, in the 9th verse, an explicit teaching of the resurrection of the body, a teaching which is common to most Christian sects, but was not held by all Jews and is rejected by some Christians even today. And in the 28th verse, we find the teaching that God created all things out of nothing, ex nihilo, rather than working with pre-existing matter. It is, of course, worth noting that the creation narrative of Genesis does not explicitly say God created all things out of nothing. The narrative picks up where God is moving over the face of the water. So something must exist at this point for him to move over. Now, we have to go elsewhere in Scripture to find support for the doctrine that God created all things out of nothing, and is thus demonstrably superior to all and the master of all creation. So, read 2nd Maccabees and also take a look at the additional materials, and also spend some time reviewing the overview of the Deuterocanon. Obviously, if you're going to use 2nd Maccabees to defend Catholic doctrine from a Protestant, you will first have to convince him that 2nd Maccabees and the rest of the Deuterocanon should be in the Bible. Also included in this week's additional materials are some apologetic resources to help you defend the doctrines that Maccabees discusses and raises. That's all for this time. Next week, I'm going to stay with historical books, but we're going to be moving to the New Testament, and we'll look at the only example of a New Testament historical book we have, the book of Acts. Until then, I'm Simon Rafe, and God bless. To learn more about the place of Scripture in the lives of Catholic Christians, I urge you to read Pope Benedict's apostolic exhortation Verbum Domini. The Pope encourages all Catholics to read, learn and love Scripture and to understand its relation to the Church. A link to this exhortation is included in the reading materials for every episode of Brown Bag Bible Study. Just click the link over there.